Hey, this is Rob Swanson with the Real Estate Mogul Show. Let's get into it. What's up, everybody? Rob Swanson here, back with another Real Estate Mogul Show. We are back in the studio, and we've got some fun conversation coming to you once again. If you have been enjoying these conversations, if you find them educational, would you do us a favor? Would you share this on your favorite podcast player? Would you share this on YouTube? Subscribe on YouTube and hit that notifications bell so you know when we drop some new conversation. All right, guys, let's dive into this. I've got the full crew back in the studio once again. Who wants to kick us off with just saying hello?
I'm saying hello because I'm back from the dead.
I like it, man. You are back from the dead finally. You look good again. I mean, you look as good as you can look.
Right. Yeah, everybody has a limit.
That's right.
Yeah, all right.
Here's what I would say, though. Can I steer your check-in?
Steer.
Because I think there's a serious parenting failure that we were talking about just moments ago. And I'd like this highlighted, you know, the epitome of perfect dad just massively screwed up.
Right.
Henry, Joe, what do you guys think?
You want me to tell the story quick?
Screw up?
This is sad. My main check-in is that we're feeling better. The crud just rolled through our kids, and then I thought, they got to the end of it. I thought, oh, I'm in the clear. And then I was not in the clear. Anyways, it's good to be back. But, yeah, so we had some folks come pick up a Facebook Marketplace item recently, and they backed their truck. This little Lexus SUV, back it up to our driveway, and they're loading up, and this little frog, I don't know what's up with frogs lately in our neighborhood. We've had these tiny little frogs, toads, whatever.
Dude.
Hopping around.
Normally in Colorado, just a side note, you see toads.
I think they're little toads.
Well, no, they're skinny, right? And they jump. Like, toads are fat and round.
Frogs jump.
Well.
Frogs jump, toads just, like, hop.
Frog, then.
Yeah. And
so this frog comes hopping down the sidewalk. Well, I'm out there with our oldest daughter. She's 8. Everything that moves on the ground has to be picked up, especially a frog, right? So these people are loading their car. This frog comes hopping through. It's like, Ken's, look, a frog. Oh, I got to catch it. So she tries to catch it, and the frog goes and hops underneath the car. We all know where this is going. And so I'm kind of helping loading this thing, loading stuff, and then they're loading up, drive away, and I go, babe, where'd your frog go? And she goes, oh, he's under the car. When they pull away, I'll go get him. Well, they pulled away, and then there was this blob in the middle of the road, and she was walking towards it, and I this is the parent. Maybe I don't know that this was a parent failure. I knew what it was.
It was just more fun to call it a parent
but
failure
I said,
than anything
right.
else.
I said, oh no, hon, did he get run over? And she went out and just, guts out the mouth, and he just got annihilated.
It's not funny, but
poor thing. She actually handled it pretty well. It's not like it was a pet frog, right?
The point of the parent failure was like, at some point, we as fathers recognize when the frog is hiding under the vehicle, it's probably not going to end well.
No. Yeah, you're right. I definitely had this. I think we're going to learn what a dead frog looks like today.
So frogs.
Anyway.
Frogs. We normally see toads in Colorado, but this year we've had so much rain. I mean, it rains, it downpours every day, like crazy, weird weather in Colorado this year. We have had so many frogs hopping through our backyard. It's crazy. I've never seen anything like it.
Yep. So we're not alone here.
No, it's weird.
I've seen them.
I took the girls to play tennis the other day at the local high school, and we had to figure out, they had the front gate locked, so you didn't think you could get in. But if you walk to the back gate, we learned, it's open. So we had to walk through the field along the back of the tennis courts. We were dodging hundreds of frogs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I've never had this experience in Colorado.
Right.
We were trying to not step on them.
Exactly.
Because they were everywhere.
Exactly.
Anyway.
My turn?
Yeah, Henry, you're up.
Yeah, Friday night, my wife and one of her friends went up early on Friday to get a camp spot for us. We took our small group from church camping. it was one of the off week events that someone brought up, and I was like, I have a couple spots that I know that we could take you guys out to. So that was fun. There was 2 or 3 of them that had really never camped before. The one couple was from Texas, recently moved here about 2 years ago, never camped out in Colorado, really never camped in general. So they used one of our spare tents. They went out, and I think they said that they bought 2 sleeping bags only to return it the next day. That weekend they returned them because they'll probably never use them again.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was, but they had a blast. It was cool
Rob
to have.
loves that, by the way.
Yeah, I don't understand it either, but
Just so that we're all clear, that's theft.
yeah,
That's stealing.
yeah.
I have
So
a story about that that I'm not going to share on the line, but a family member, extended, years ago attempted to do something like that.
Car seat story.
Yeah, attempted to do something like that under my watch, and that did not happen.
yeah, I mean, that was their plan. So I don't know if they ended up doing it.
They didn't.
I want to say that they didn't because, or I hope that they didn't because they had a lot of fun. Like they had a blast
Until 2:30.
Oh yeah,
You gonna tell the whole camping story?
I'll tell it. I'll make it brief. Everything's going well. We get a nice spot, but so we do camp, do the fire, do everything that we all would normally do. 11:30 goes around. We all go to bed. Everyone goes in their tents. Olivia and I go up in the rooftop tent and pass out, sound asleep. 2:30 rolls around, and there is a posse of families that roll up at 2:30 a.m. And when I say parked beside us, I mean parked beside us. I peeked out. It woke us up. It was 4 trucks, 1 SUV. Every truck had a pull behind pop-up
generator.
camper. They proceeded to pull out a generator per camper, turn them on, lights on, start a fire, kids running around. Kid you not, 2:30 a.m. in this campground area. Everybody else in this whole valley is asleep right now, and they roll up like that.
Wow.
It was insane. I've never I have been around people like this before, but it's been a while to be around people so oblivious and also just rude and non-caring to the people around them.
Wow.
The dude went in and out of his F-150 probably 10 times, and every time he locked it and beeped it, and the lights went on, and it was flashing in my buddy Colson's tent every time.
What on earth?
Right.
Did you talk to these guys?
Yeah, we went over multiple times.
Henry fought off 12 of them.
Multiple times. It was ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. So that sucks.
It sucked. It was so bad. And so the funniest part was when the first time we went over there was like, what's going on, guys? Everyone in this campground is sleeping. I understand you guys just got here. And she was like, oh, we're just setting up. And I was like, well, you've been setting up for like an hour. It doesn't take that long. You should be getting ready for bed. And she was like, oh, we're almost done. And an hour went by. They left the generator on that night as well. That ended up turning into white noise for me, so it like wasn't that big of a deal. It was brutal. It was so bad.
That's crazy.
That is
Joe on the buttons. What's up?
Yeah, it's going good. Had a good weekend. I finished up watching my friend's house and pets. So that ended Saturday. Kind of relaxed that afternoon. Did a little bit of work, and then Sunday I hooked up with a friend, and we went to the center that we meditate at in Denver and put in some AC units. We had an old one, and it's 2 rooms. We had an old one that was sort of like still kind of working on the one room, but it was pretty old. And so we picked up new ones and got them installed. And that was a little bit outside of my comfort zone as far as like, I thought it was going to be. It actually was really like pretty easy and straightforward. And so it was a blast. So.
Duct tape, paper towels, and if you need a little bit of extra, some toothpaste.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You can fix anything.
100%. And actually, I had a little pocket knife that came in handy because we needed sort of a a T, a real small screwdriver in a T form to get inside, like sort of on the edge to put these brackets in. So
well, I don't know if
came
you're
through.
I don't know if you're sharing the picture, but if I'm looking at the image
Yeah.
of the work you guys did, well done, well done.
Well, this was prior to. So this is, if you can see this, if you're watching the video, that's an old building that they totally destroyed the window area on the bottom to accommodate the first AC. And so now we plugged all that up, and ultimately we'll, make it look nice. But it's all sealed with foam and really nice. And the other one was a wide window like that, same type of unit, just a smaller one. And again, sealed with foam. They were pretty easy to install and pretty fun.
Well, I like it.
Yep.
Cool. Well, let's just dive into this, guys. I'm going to give a 30-second update for me. I am attempting to upgrade the speed of my airplane. We talk about airplanes occasionally. It's kind of one of my things. I like it. I'm attempting to upgrade the speed of my airplane by selling my airplane and buying a new one. I am under contract. Knock on wood. I'm not gonna say anything else about it. The pre-buy is coming up, and so we'll see how that goes. And if it passes the inspection, we'll get it across the finish line. And if it doesn't, we'll decide what we do from there, and we'll go searching for the next
Stuff
one.
gets done when you're not here.
Just like a house.
Just exactly like a house. Same exact process,
Same
right?
process.
Evaluate it, figure out what you're going to pay for it, make the offer, negotiate a little bit, land on something that works for everybody, go under contract, start the inspection process, figure out if what you assumed it actually is. If it is, move forward. If it isn't, either renegotiate or move on to the next one.
Rob, is it common in the airplane world to test flight?
Yep.
The plane before you buy it, I would think.
Yep.
At what stage does that come in? Is that post inspection?
Yeah, I'll do the pre-buy.
Okay.
And then before I purchase and take ownership, I'll go down there with the owner.
Okay.
Or his CFI or whoever he designates.
Yep.
And I'll go fly the airplane with them.
Okay. I figured, but I didn't know.
Yep.
You
where
missed
that
the pros and cons lunch that we had
Pros
to
and
make
cons.
Rob's decision.
Ah,
Yeah, you were sick.
dang.
Yep.
You could have had a large play in this.
I provided the visuals, and they're critical.
That's right. Well, guys, let's dive into this. We're going a little bit long maybe today on our intros, but I want to jump in and just talk about the concept of using private money or private money as it relates to real estate investing. And we all have stories about private money, private lenders, how it has impacted our business in various ways. I think of private money a lot of times as gasoline that you can pour on a fire, right? You've got the fire lit. Maybe you've got a coal burning, and if you hit it with gasoline, it can explode into something fast. And it can become something very quickly. That's what I view private money as. Private money is gasoline. And because every real estate deal needs to get funded in some way, right? It needs to get funded through owner financing or cash or traditional financing or hard money or private money. Somehow, the gasoline of funding needs to get poured into a real estate deal. And so private money is that gasoline. Now, I want us to, let me back up and let's start there. But one of the things that I want us to do is talk about the difference between private money and hard money, because that, a lot of times hard money is advertised out in the social media world or online as private money. But there's a massive distinction and difference between the two. I want to get to that distinction in a moment, but as we kick off this discussion on private money and just talk about, how we've used it, stories, Do you guys have anything to start the conversation with? Any direction you want to take it, or thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to input to define private money quick, because like you just mentioned, the words private money get thrown around a lot, but you've always used the definition of a non-professional lender synonymous with private money. And so it's interesting because you just brought up a lot of hard money lenders will advertise as private money, but a hard money lender is a professional lender, at least a part-time professional lender.
Yep.
Which the definition you taught me years ago wouldn't fit that mold. So
Well, here,
I think it would be useful if you dove into sort of defining, because there's a spectrum of lending.
Yep.
Right?
So
lay that out quick.
let's lay out the spectrum first. And so the spectrum goes from traditional bank financing, which is what the masses of people know, all the way to private money, which people misunderstand. And in the middle, there's different categories. So traditional lending. Traditional lending is credit-based. So you have to have a proven, quote-unquote, credit score and a proven track record of paying in the past, or historically making payments. So if your credit score is quote-unquote high and you put enough money down to protect the lender will give you the money. So it's credit-based, and it's down payment. So they're looking at the qualifications of you as the borrower to repay the loan as the determination as to whether they'll make the loan. Okay, that's traditional financing. We get to, in the middle, then there's from traditional financing, then there's owner financing. So owner financing is a seller becoming the lender. And really, seller financing is kind of like private money, a little different, but I kind of think about it the same way. That seller is not in the business of lending, but because this is an opportunity that presents and it makes sense to solve their real estate problem, they become the lender. Then we get over to, and let's just go to hard money and private money on the opposite end of the spectrum here. And let's talk about the definition here. Because this is what most real estate investors seek out and look for when they're getting started in the real estate investing game. They're looking for, and everybody says, I'm looking for private money. Okay. Well, let's talk about hard money and private money. Hard money is a lender that is in the business of lending. They're in the business of lending. A private money lender is not in the business of lending. Okay? A hard money lender sets the rate, sets the terms, and tells you how much money they'll lend. A private money lender lends to you because of the opportunity that you give them based on the relationship that you have. And so a private money lender trusts you. And so you go to the private money lender and say, I want to borrow X amount of money for purchase, X amount of money for repairs, or X amount of money in total on this deal. And that private lender lends because you've given them the opportunity. A private money lender is looking to invest their excess capital. And then when they discover real estate investing and they discover private lending, they say, wait a minute, I can lend my money to somebody that I know, like, and trust. I can secure my money against the real estate asset at a fair to safe loan to value, and I can cover my investment with insurance. I can't do that in the stock market. If knucklehead CEO over here on the stock market says something stupid on CNN, all of a sudden, or CNBC, all of a sudden my stock goes down, my money disappears. Private lending not only pays a cash flow on a monthly or quarterly basis, but it also covers and protects in ways that traditional investments don't. So you go buy a stock, you pay retail. You lend private money, you're lending at a discounted rate to begin with. So back to the difference between hard money and private money. A hard money lender typically requires you to pay some origination points. They typically require you to pay interest on a monthly basis. They typically require you to pay for repairs, and then they'll reimburse those repairs. And they typically require you to put some amount of capital down or money down to get into the deal. If you got a good enough deal, a hard money lender will sometimes lend 100% of the purchase price, but you still have to front-end fund the construction in most cases, and then they'll reimburse you over time. And so the point of all of that is a hard money lender's in the business of lending, and they set the terms. A private money lender, you go to them up front and say, I'm buying this asset, I want to borrow this amount of money, and that private money lender wires all of that money in to escrow, to the title company at closing, and then those funds get dispersed appropriately at closing. Some of it goes to the sellers to buy the house. Some of it goes to you to fund construction and for whatever other purposes you have for that money.
Yeah, also, on the hard money side, I think a lot of our listeners would be interested in you potentially talking about, on the hard money side, we're talking like a 12-month term here. Like you said, they dictate the terms, but most of the time,
Yep.
it is short-lived. And if you need to extend it, there's a fee with that.
Yep.
And you could extend it another 6 months. And there are some companies that will extend the hard money loan into a longer, 15, 30 year, but all that costs money in comparison to the private lender side when, you're just looking for that money for, 20, 30 years, whatever that may be.
Yep. Well, when you're working with a hard money lender, you're asking them what they will do. When you're working with a private money lender, the private lender is asking you what they should do.
Right.
Yeah,
That's the difference.
And
Huge difference.
On the first rental that I bought, Mike and I were in his office and we were juggling around different ideas on how to fund it. And I was talking to traditional at the time, but also I just posted in a couple groups saying looking for private money, right? And the distinction obviously shows itself really fast because you get on the phone with people that it is one guy. And they say that they are a private lender, but the big distinction is that they give you their description immediately. I do boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
And then you fit into that bucket if you want to.
That's right.
And it shows itself really fast.
Right. So it might be a private individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rob Swanson might be considered a private lender, right? But really, I'm a hard money lender because I'm going to set the terms and I'm going to tell you, borrower, how this is going to go down. Now, I might be flexible. I might be negotiable. I might be easy to work with. And I'm a private individual. I'm not a company that is, I'm not a quote unquote lender. But I'm a hard money lender because I'm setting the terms. And so that is the distinction. So when you went out and said, hey, I'm looking for private money, private individuals that are in the business of lending reached out to you. And so now you're dealing with a hard money lender.
Disguised as a private lender.
Disguised
And
as a private
when
lender.
we worked the numbers backwards, it was pretty appalling how bad the cash flow would have gotten eaten into, basically.
Well, yeah. And that's to your point of the short term. Hard money is not generally intended to be a long-term cash flowing.
More like a bridge
debt.
loan.
It's more like a bridge. And so I always tell people it's not the cost of the capital that matters. It's the availability of the funds, right? So it doesn't matter how much the money costs, as long as the money is available to get the deal done, as long as you know how to then mitigate those costs over time.
Rob,
and roll out of that short-term financing, because people will put themselves into a pinch where they've got a short-term 6-month loan They got into the deal, but they didn't consider or think about how do I get out of it. Joe, I know you got something to say.
No, I was just wondering if you remember when you made that shift on your real estate journey into, oh, hey, I can use, from hard money to private money.
Yeah, I mean, I really never used hard money. I mean, I kind of did the private money thing all from the get-go. And, to this day, I like working with new private lenders. I like working with somebody who sits here and, okay, they're listening to this podcast. They're hearing us talk about private money, hard money, lending. And they've never considered, this money I've got sitting in my IRA, this money I got sitting in my 401k, this money I've got sitting in the bank, this money I've got invested in the stock market that I'm not really super comfortable with. I could do something where I lend it. And this is the cool thing. That money never goes to me. The money goes to the title company. And until that title and until that money is secured like a regular bank would, secured by the real estate, and covered by insurance, that money never goes anywhere. And so I love working with newer individuals who say, I never knew I could do that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's just another more mental barriers to break through because the way that you just described it, it's the same as me, logging onto my Robinhood account and going and buying something that's backed by that money, a stock or crypto or anything like that. In your scenario, it's the same thing.
That's right.
Never went to Rob. It goes through title.
Yep.
Then it's backed by the asset, and then they're protected through, I assume, the deed of trust or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're protected by a promissory note, a deed of trust, and insurance.
Yep.
So
same as a bank.
Just like a bank.
Which is important to know because there are clearly some differences between traditional lending and private lending.
Yep.
But there are some similarities, and the similarity is the security of the lender.
That's right. And when it's private money, you as the borrower, as the real estate investor that is setting the terms, so it's your responsibility to set your private lender up for success because they often don't know, right? And I consider this a great responsibility when somebody comes to me and says, I know you've been investing for 20 years. I don't really want to own real estate. I don't want to be the operator. I don't want to manage the manager. I don't want to manage the tenants. I don't want to be the active overseer. But I want to put my money to work secured by real estate, covered by insurance, at a discount. I want to be a value investor, and I want to play it in real estate. But I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get in the game. And so when somebody comes to me, I find that it's my responsibility then to educate them and say, okay, if I were in your shoes, here are the questions that I would be asking. And so, we talk about this. I talk about it as the breakfast conversation, right? A lot. So a lot of times a private lender will reach out so we'll have some conversation and we'll sit down over breakfast and they'll say, well, talk to me about private money. Talk to me about what does this mean? Or, how does this work? And the fastest way that I have found to turn a private lender away is to just pursue and say, well, I got this deal and I need, $100,000 and how fast can you fund it? Okay. That never works. So what I always do is I always presume that they're interested because we're having the conversation, but they're not moving forward because they're not educated. So I always take the approach of teaching private money to a potential lender in order to get them to the place where they're comfortable to say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I see how it works. Let's do something.
Have you ever found that as you explain more, let's just say they came into the conversation a little bit more sophisticated on the topic of private lending and just making a good return on their money in general. Mm-hmm. Have you ever found that person's going to come to the table already wanting, obviously they know that the cash flow is going to be X, but has anyone ever came to you and said, I want the cash flow, but we need to split the equity at the end as well if you ever sell it? Has that ever come up?
I I've had people try.
Mhm.
I've had people say that that's what they want to do, and then at the end of the day, you have to decide: does that work for you?
Right.
So if you sat down with me and said, "Hey, Rob, I got this deal, my third rental I'm buying. I'm looking for some private money. Are you in with me?" I'd probably say that.
Yeah. No, I know you would. I'm just because I could only imagine that as they learned more, and the general public knows about real estate and how it appreciates and how it has appreciated in the last couple years.
Yep.
I would only imagine that they would be savvy enough to say, well, when you sell this on the back end, are we splitting it or are we not splitting it, kind of thing. So.
Yep. And so then you have to decide, what does so you as the borrower, as the real estate investor, what does your private money lending program look like? What are you offering, right? So let me ask you, what are you offering? If you were to say, hey, I'm interested in going out and seeking private money, what do you think? Do you have a framework yet? Have you thought about it enough to know what your private lender program might look like?
Well, one thing that I know that I can quote unquote pitch is that historically the properties that I buy are at a very cheap discount, meaning that immediately when I buy, I'm sitting on overnight equity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also buying in areas where I know are up and coming, where
you think are up and coming, and you want to be very careful about what you say.
I guess
versus what you think.
my thesis on that is that it backs or lines up to other zip codes and municipalities that have already been hit with the growth.
Yep.
And it's pushing into the next area. So that's my thesis of it all.
Yep.
And even if it didn't happen in the next 5 years, I'm sitting on a good amount of equity because buying off market.
Yep.
And I have an average cash flow of X on every property so far.
Yep.
Because I've bought it at a discount.
And let's carry that out a little bit. So a couple of things you said. You said that that you're buying in zip codes that are appreciating. You said I want to caution anybody listening to not use the word because we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We believe, and we're operating our investment thesis based on our best guesses and our best data points of what we believe. So number one, we believe, but number two, in 5 years, if something went down, you said, I'm sitting on all this equity. What if you weren't? What if in 5 years the market crashed and you weren't sitting on all that equity? What if all of that equity went away?
I would still be sitting in a better position than someone that would have lost all that money in the stock market at the time, because I'm still making money on the asset.
Yep. And how does that impact your private lender?
It would still allow them to be making money or a return on their original investment.
Exactly.
Versus if they were trying to do it a more traditional way.
So the point that I'm making is, if you go into a private money conversation and you're educating based on, I know I'm buying in appreciating areas and I know that I've bought at this discount and in 5 years from now I still have this discount. What you want to do is you want to show that let me tell you how I approach the conversation. I sit down, my breakfast conversation starts like this. It says, so Henry, I understand you're interested in doing some private lending. I understand you haven't done much, if any, private lending in the past. So what I'd like to do over the next 30 minutes as we have breakfast here together is talk about what private lending is in general, kind of how it works. And then to take the big elephant in the room, I want to talk about the most common ways that you could lose all of your money. Does that sound like a fair way to tackle the conversation? And people are like, yeah, that sounds fair.
Right. And they're not expecting you to say that.
They're not expecting me to say it, because most people teach that what you should do to get private money is to go sell the upside and to go sell the high returns and to go sell the opportunity. And I take the opposite. I want to teach you to be an informed lender, because if I teach you how I see real estate investing and why I'm making the decisions I am on the assets that I'm acquiring and what I believe the worst day is, then you're an informed lender coming into this saying, okay, this guy knows what he's like. This guy has thought through some worst case scenarios. And I always start the worst case scenario by saying this. You decide you want to do a deal with me. You send the wire in. The wire goes to the title company. The excess or the overage for construction comes to me after closing. I take the cash and I disappear to Antigua or some place. And I steal the money, right?
But just the excess.
Yeah, well, because the money, or let's say that I tricked you into wiring all your money to me, and then I took the money, right? The worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, I'm telling you, never send your money directly to the borrower. Always send it to the title company. So number one, I've said that, right? Number two, what's the worst case scenario? Immediately after that happens, the title company is in cahoots with me, right? And we trick you. Okay? Let's say the title company's not in cahoots, and now I get the overage. And now people are like, oh, okay, I see kind of a worst case, scenario. And then we start to talk through this. I say, okay, well, let's assume for a moment that you funded, everything got dispersed, we own the asset, and the day after we fund, a fire breaks out, it burns down, and I didn't secure insurance. Okay, now we have a burned out house that you lent on. We have no house because it burnt to the ground and we don't have insurance. So I tell them the second thing I want you to always do is make sure that you verify that the house is covered by insurance before you ever lend. So you can start to see that I'm teaching a private lender how to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm doing my job as a real estate investor correctly, I should be able to teach you how to protect yourself. You trust me more because I'm doing that. And now we create a long-term winning relationship built on trust. And that is the key to private money.
It's interesting that as you're talking through the conversation, first off, they wouldn't be at breakfast with you if there wasn't an element of interest, and probably if I 100% didn't trust you as a person, we wouldn't be at breakfast, right?
Right.
So they're already there. And then you turn the conversation and you say, all right, let's talk about the worst day. And what it does is it kind of checks off in the lender's mind. They're not thinking this consciously, but subconsciously, they wouldn't even be at the breakfast if they didn't think they could trust you.
Yep.
And so the quote unquote worst days are just being checked off the list.
Yep.
That's not even an issue anymore.
And it's the elephant in the room, right?
Yep.
I know that they're sitting there thinking, how am I going to lose money? They're thinking, what's the catch? They're thinking, what am I missing? That's what every new private lender is thinking, right? And so they're sitting there thinking, what's the catch? How am I going to lose money? And, how does this deal work? And so when I just come in with the big elephant in the room and say, hey, let's tackle it like this, the relief that they have is great, because they figure that I'm going to try to sell them something, and they're going to have to use their lens and evaluate risk on everything that I'm saying. And I say, no, I'll tell you what all the risks are. I'll tell you what the worst days are, and I'll tell you how to mitigate and navigate against them, because if I do that well, we both win. And I'll tell you guys, that approach to private lending is a different game than what most people do.
Yeah.
Most people sit down with their pitch deck and they say, let me give you a slideshow.
Wearing a suit.
Or wearing a suit, right?
Or I guess could potentially just come to the table with like a spreadsheet of their portfolio and say, look how good it's doing as well.
Yeah. And so like there's not a problem in showing
Proof.
So you want to see proof. You want to know that a person is legit. And so showing, like a lot of times with guys or gals that I work with, it's a text. Hey, I've got this house. Here's what it's worth. Here's what I'm paying. Here's what I want to. Here's what the construction costs are. All in loan I'm looking for is this. Here's the loan to value, and I just lay that out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, address, the numbers, and then the cash flow. And here's what I typically do, and I think this is fair. What I typically do is I say to a private lender, Mike, you're the lender. You put up all the money. I'll do all the work, and we'll split the cash flow. And that generally works. And so that lands most long-term private money into monthly cash flow to the private lender for a rental portfolio. Long-term private money in the 6 to 8% range.
Yeah, I guess in that scenario, if it was just laid out, the cash flow is split, how does that correlate up to, you know, an 8% interest rate on the loan?
Do the math, right? Do the math.
Well, yeah,
So-
I'm bringing it up because someone probably just heard that and they're like, wait, how does that work?
Yeah. So give me the numbers on a deal.
Let's just say I have a house under contract for $75,000.
Okay.
And I know, even if it's tenant occupied or not, I know as it sits right now, it needs $10,000 worth of work.
Okay. So 75,000 plus 10,000 in repairs.
85.
85. Two things. What is it rent for? And if it's 85,
Let's just say at $75,000, it rents for $1,100.
okay. And what's it worth?
Let's say it's worth $100,000.
Okay, I want to do that deal.
Not
You're-
lending 85 on an asset worth 100.
Not 85.
Right. Okay, let's just say it's 125.
Okay. So at all in of 85 divided by 125.
Because he
which is
wants to be
the value
protected.
by equity.
Yeah, by
30%.
equity. 30%. So 70% loan to value, right?
Yep. I always say 70 to 72%.
Okay.
Is what I target. So that's 68%. So if you borrowed 85 and it's worth 125. So now if it's worth 125 and you'll borrow up to 72%, you could borrow up to 90.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So what would happen then? You've got a little, because you know that you said that it's going to take $10,000 to fix it up. But what if it takes 11?
Mm-hmm.
What if it takes 12 and a half? What if it takes 13? So I always like to borrow on a rental property a little over what I anticipate the cost being, because
Because it's smart.
it's smart.
That's how construction works.
That's how construction works.
Yeah.
And what
For sure.
what a lender does not want to get into is an operator or a real estate investor that runs out of money before they get to the finish line and turn that asset into a cash flowing machine, right? And so you could borrow up to 90. 90 divided by the 125 is 72%. Okay? So 72%. So now, what does it rent for?
$1,100.
$1,100. So $1,100 rent. Let's just assume 30% operating cost, TIM V, taxes, insurance, maintenance, management, vacancy. So take our 1,100 times 0.7. So a $770 per month net cash flow, net operating income, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you got $770 to play with. If you just split the cash flow, just split it down the middle 50-50, divided by 2, that's $385 a month. Okay? Times 12 months, Okay, this is what you're going to pay your lender annually. Okay, $4,620 annually divided by their $90,000 loan. That's 5%. Okay, does a lender take 5%?
I don't know. Probably not.
Does a lender take 5%?
Yep.
Depending on what they're used to.
Depends on the lender, but yeah, it's within reason.
So cutting it in half is $385. Here's how we get to it. What's your minimum? What is your minimum cash flow on an asset
That you like making on a door.
you require you make on a door?
Mm-hmm.
What's your minimum?
Right now?
Yep.
I'm a little spoiled.
No. Okay. What's your minimum?
Oh.
Just tell me what's your buy box? What is your required net cash flow? I know what my number is.
Mine's 450 right now.
Okay. So you got 770 minus 450. You got $320 to pay that lender at the price that you paid for the asset.
So
Does that deal work?
are you reverse engineering up to what the rate of the loan is going to be?
Okay, no, I'm saying what is your minimum net cash flow that you want to put into your hip pocket National Bank? And you said 450.
450.
Okay. So that means what you have left over to pay the lender is $320.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so times 12 divided by the $90,000 loan you said you asked for, that's 4.2%.
Yep. Now that rate's going to go down
Mm-hmm.
That's 4.2%.
because you're paying them less.
So how do you fix? So you either have to do one of two things. You either have to find a lender that's willing to take 4.2%, good luck,
Or
you have to buy better deals.
Get it at a better price.
You have to
Or
get it at a better price.
or he adjusts down as if 450 is non-negotiable, you have two options.
That's
if
right.
450 is negotiable, you have three
yeah,
options.
I can adjust on my end.
Yep.
And or get it for a better price, and or get a nicer house that needs less work.
Well, nicer house, less work doesn't really come into it.
Okay.
Like property condition, irrelevant. It all comes down to what's the lender willing to take? Well, it starts with what are you willing to take?
Mm-hmm.
What's your minimum requirement? And, this is what I want people listening to get, is that is the thing that drives everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know that you have Tim V. When you have gross rent of $1,100 a month, you know you have Tim V. Taxes, insurance, maintenance, management, vacancy. That's going to be 30% off the top. That's just going to go. So out of $1,100, you have left $770. The thing that you can control and know and design your buy box around is what is your personal minimum. And so you said right now your personal minimum is 450. Okay? That means the deal you gave me does not work for private money.
Right.
And then you have to decide, okay, what do I have to fit in? Do I have to adjust my personal minimum? Do I have to find a lender that's willing to take a lower rate?
Well,
Or do I have to buy the deal better?
and I think my mind basically just needs to think about it in a better way, because I would say I need to be okay doing 350, because that means in this deal scenario, I walked away with, was it 15 grand of over funding that went straight to me, which is great. And then I also didn't have to come out of pocket 20% if I would go the normal route to get, $500 of cash flow.
You only walked out of the deal with $5,000 in overfunding because 10 of it went into the rehab.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So 5 of it went
put
into
5 in
your
your pocket.
went into your pocket
Right.
to cover any overages or anything else. It's like that security fund, that slush fund, right? So 5 was the overage.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you have the option to buy it cheaper, find a lender willing to take the 4.2, or adjust your personal minimum.
And that's what I'm saying. I think at that moment I I would feel okay with going down from 450 to 375 because I didn't have to, on the $75,000 purchase price, what I've normally been doing is I'm going to have to come out of pocket 13, 14 grand for a down payment, which I'm avoiding in this scenario.
Yeah, here you're not only not out of pocket, but you're $5,000 in pocket.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
That's right.
So this,
I can filter that down payment into other things to make more money.
That's right.
Yeah.
So here's the question. And this is the mistake many real estate investors make. You walked into this conversation and you said my personal minimum is 450. It took me 8 minutes to get you to say, well, I'd do 350, 375. I'll bet if you gave me another 3.5 minutes, I could get you to 300, 275, 250.
Well, what's yours?
250.
250.
250 net cash flow per door. I almost always buy it at a better cash flow than that, but I will operate my portfolio at 250.
And you're okay with that, knowing that in that scenario you went private money and you didn't have to come out of pocket anything, and you put some money in your pocket from the overfunding.
Correct. I overfunded, so I made money up front. So this deal's got my attention. We're going to get it across the finish line. I've got net positive cash flow coming in. I bought it at a higher cap rate. I overfunded it to a lower cap rate that gave me my net cash flow of $250 per door.
So in this scenario, for the people listening, would you always teach and want to teach people how to get the lender used to a certain percent of return, or always used to splitting cash flow?
Well, let's take your scenario again, and let's relook at it with my number. Okay, let's take that 1,100 times 0.7, so we're taking out 30% of our operating costs, minus, so 770 minus 250. Now I have $520 to pay the lender, times 12 divided by 90. That's 7%. Okay, so now what you need is a private lender who wants to lend secured against real estate, covered by insurance, and make 7% on their money with cash flow coming in, interest only, cash flow coming into their pocket every month. Okay, so you look at the stock market and you say, yeah, I can get 7% in the stock market on paper, right? In real estate, you're actually getting a check that gets deposited into your bank account every single month, or an ACH or a wire, right? You're actually putting that $500 in your pocket every single month. And then you have to decide with your lender, is that amortized? Is it interest only, right? But at the end of the day, the lender has equity, has security, has insurance coverage, and has cash flow. So take the stock market 7%, even take the stock market that says it pays 8%, 8.5%. I would take 7% with all of those benefits and I get the money, versus on paper I get 8% in my monthly or quarterly statements from my stock portfolio, because all of that growth disappears in a 24-hour period with one CNBC report. And it drops. And how do I know that? Because I've had this conversation with hundreds of private lenders over the years, and that's exactly the story they tell me, right? I saw it on the personal side years ago, and I vowed at a younger age when I was getting into real estate investing that I was never going to put myself and my family in a position to let some TV report or some economic thing or some whatever impact me in that way. Now that doesn't mean that things don't impact me. I mean, I invested aggressively through the crash in 2008, and those were fantastic years. Those were really good years, right? And so at the end of the day, investing inherently has this word risk associated with it. But if we can understand the worst day and approach our investing theory with a description of what the worst day is, there's a good chance we're going to navigate through it successfully. And I've been able to do that for 20 some years.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean I haven't lost money. Doesn't mean I haven't had a bad deal. But I have a lot fewer of those today because of all the years of experience and the battle wounds along the way. And now I say, okay, I know what my theory is. I know what my thesis is. I have a pretty good ability to see what the worst day is. Even if I don't know what's going to be the cause of the worst day, I understand what the worst day potentially is. And then I navigate and build around it.
I'm going to point out something that we take for granted as obvious, but you absolutely can participate in real estate and you can participate in monthly cash flow and not own the real estate at the time. And I think a lot of the world has a perception that, so I like the idea of passive monthly income coming in, but in order to do that, I have to own rentals.
Yep.
I don't want to own roofs. I don't want to own all this.
Yep.
Lenders in this scenario, which is very common. So I'm pointing out what's obvious in our office because it's not obvious to everybody. Private lenders participate in real estate. Private lenders have monthly cash flow. They just don't have to worry about roofs. Right? Assuming things are that potentially may have to take back a property in a foreclosure and that kind of thing. But
yeah,
they're involved in cash flow.
Yep.
Not really on the sidelines. I was going to say on the sidelines. That's not the right way to put it. But they're passive, but they're not actively operating the rental property.
That's right.
The owner is.
Yeah. Now you're
investor is.
even in that mindset. You know, we talked to a couple people last year at our event where, like, I don't remember his name, but his main model was acquiring and then selling it as the owner on terms and then just holding the paper.
Yep.
Like that's his game.
Yep.
Like I don't think at the time when meeting that guy, he owned a single piece of real estate, but he owned a portfolio of notes.
He had notes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And look, that's a whole nother conversation and a whole nother show. Like that's good. But I definitely like to blend.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we start thinking about the freedom formula that we talk about a lot, and that second phase of it where we're creating cash flow, I like to create that cash flow through the ownership of the physical asset, not just the paper asset, because the paper asset, somebody else controls when that gets paid off. So if all of the borrowers on that paper decided tomorrow, you know what, rates are really good, oh, this new lending program came out, I'm going to refinance and pay off, his cash flow could go to zero overnight. Whereas when you own the real estate, nobody typically can force you to sell the real estate. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but generally nobody can force you to sell the real estate. And so you don't wake up one morning and say, my tenants are refinancing and I'm losing my cash flow, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen. And so I always tell people I love notes. I love the cash flow from notes. I love the passivity of notes, but they do pay off. And then you're down to zero. So I like to build that income exceeds outgo through the ownership of the asset, that passive income financial freedom number in that way. So what I want people to hear is that we're running this math, right? The 4.2%, 5%, 6%, 7%, based on the scenario that you gave. And if you want a higher rate of return, then the operator needs to buy at a cheaper rate. So, or at a cheaper price. So, because if that lender was only lending $80,000, so instead of buying it for $75,000, you bought it for $65,000, put $10,000 into it, and borrowed $80,000. All of a sudden, that rate, their ROI, the lending rate goes up because they're lending a lower principal amount, right? And so we're talking about numbers here based on a scenario that you gave out, not saying that this is what private lenders get. I want people to hear that. Because the other side of it is we're talking about long-term private lending in a cash flow portfolio, right? And that number is typically lower than if you're doing private lending on a short-term in and out fix and flip or wholesalers portfolio. The difference is now it's not passive. For you as the lender, if you're lending for this fix and flip, if you're lending for a wholesale deal, if you're lending in and then out, you're going in and you're getting paid back, and you're going in and you're getting paid back. Now you're active, and so your rate per deal is higher, but when you start to calculate it annualized and you factor in the fact that, I was paid off for, half of the month of July, and then I was paid off for half of the month of September, and then I was paid off, you know what I mean? Like, you're not in, you're in and out. Your blended average annual return is lower than the papered number you're being paid per deal. And so,
is there a difference on how that could potentially be taxed? Like one's passive and one's now considered active?
Potentially. Yeah, probably. It comes down to the lender itself and how they claim the income. I'm going to, like, if I'm a private lender long-term, and typically it's, if I'm in and out on assets less than a year, it's probably ordinary income and taxed at the higher rate. If I'm over a year, and I'm not a CPA, right? But in general, right, the rule of a CPA is it necessary, ordinary, and reasonable? And then generally I have heard over a year, you quote unquote qualify for capital gains versus ordinary income.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to put you in that situation. I was meaning it more on the lines of meaning it more on the lines of like that is a more beneficial upside to keeping it long term.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it comes down to this: how much money do you have that you're trying to put to work? Because the more money you have, the harder it is to put it all to work and keep it to work. You have to, like, that's where you start to look at alternative investments, right? When you have a lot of money, you meet the qualifications of being an accredited investor, and all of a sudden you start to look at alternative investments, and you're trying to place larger amounts of capital in more passive deals for longer term, because it's hard to manage and keep that money deployed the more you have, right? If you got $100,000, that's easy. You can put that, you can be active with $100,000 or $250,000 or even $500,000. You can be active with that on short-term deals in and out, but you're going to be active. Or you can say, you know what? I don't want to be active. I got $500,000 sitting here. I want to put it to work, secured by real estate, covered by insurance, with equity and monthly cash flow. I'm willing to take a lower fixed rate of return rather than be active and have to calculate what my lower blended number is off of the papered payment rate on a short-term deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's how a lender, I mean, this is how I think about it, right? It's how I personally think about it. And the more money you have, the more likely you are to want to take a chunk of capital and deploy it, put it to work, and let it start paying you. And so, again, if we think about this as the real estate investor, I said I started by splitting the cash flow. And then you gave a scenario, and the splitting of the cash flow was a little bit more hedged to 2/3, 1/3, right? If my fixed number was 250 and the lender was getting 520, right? They're getting 2/3 of the cash flow. I'm getting 1/3 of the cash flow in the scenario that you laid out.
Yeah.
Personally, I would buy cheaper. Like that deal that you laid out, I would buy cheaper. And I would make the numbers for me and the lender better. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That math is key because it opens up the options, how to think about it, how to talk about it.
Totally.
What's in it, right? And you got to always be thinking, what's in it for the lender, what's in it for me?
Yep.
It's got to be the win-win.
It's got to be a win-win.
So that math is, we kind of blew through it fairly quickly, and it's not overly complicated math. You just have to do it right because that gives you the picture of what's going on here and how to put it together.
And you have to do this. You have to know what your personal minimum is. As the real estate investor, if you don't know what your personal minimum is, then you can't define your buy box and calculate your buy box to say, I can't pay more than X. Every real estate asset out there has a price that Rob will pay.
Yeah.
Every asset has a price that Rob will pay, right? Because Rob's going to look at it and say, does it meet my minimum? And then based on that minimum, does the whole thing blend out and allow me to create a scenario that's a win-win for me, a lender involved, and anything else?
Yeah, I mean, this helps to the listeners on the wholesaling side of things too.
Totally.
Like now you're going to start understanding when you're looking for buyers why potentially they are balking at how bad your price could be or how good it could be.
Right.
Because of how well you did on the acquisition of the offer.
Yep.
Side of things.
That's right.
It actually helps you as a wholesaler here, in general.
100%. Yeah. If as a wholesaler you're flipping deals and generating cash, and you're sometimes wondering why are people passing on this, start to think about it from the point of view of
the math
buyer,
they're running on their end.
math they're running, the private lender. Like, do the math and say, is there enough here to pay a private lender a reasonable return, and the investor still to put a profit monthly in Hip Pocket National Bank that's worth the effort? There are numbers that are not worth the effort. Somebody might look at that deal that I say $250 a month net cash flow as my minimum and say that's too low. Well, my criteria is I'm going to buy it higher. I'm going to overfund and operate it at the net 250. So what people might have missed is I'm going to put some money into the bank up front, and that's just good operating practice, right? Anybody running a portfolio needs to have the ability to have cash set aside, because guess what? This is investing. Things do happen. And when you're not prepared for it because you don't have the experience to prepare for it, that's when people don't like each other. So just do it right.
Prepare.
Guys, let's do this. Let's jump into the last section here as we wrap it up. The Mogul memes. I think we got a couple on the board. Is that right, Joe, this week?
Yeah, we got a couple.
All right. Let's do it. When you finally find your community.
I don't know what movie this is off of.
Who did this one? I don't even know who this is.
Was mine. Just thinking about proximity and community, and being around the office and people getting involved in the academy in different ways that they're getting in proximity to us, and that feels good because you begin to take on those attributes of feeling inspired and want to put action forward. So
Oh yeah, on this point, a lot of people think of investing in yourself, and the community helps you be around people when you're in trouble and you have people to ask questions to. It's that, but I think what it's more of is what you just mentioned, is being in proximity to people that are also doing what you're doing to back up your mindset and help you keep going.
Huge.
I think that's, for me, that's like 90% of it. It's great that I can ask Mike questions, right? But
it's not that great.
It's great that I can ask people questions.
It's pretty great.
It's pretty great, and get answers. But what's better is that I can walk in here and I know it works.
That's right.
It is great. I like our conversation.
Oh, thanks, man.
No, it is great because, save the education, save the training, save the stuff. Just being around people that are thinking the same way, that are having these conversations, that are taking action, that are doing things that are winning, that matters.
It's contagious.
It's contagious. Winning is contagious.
Oh my gosh, what's that guy's name?
Robert Downey
Winning?
Jr.
No.
Oh, I think
Albert Einstein.
we were all wrong.
All right, guys, here's the next one. I should have spent less time working on theories of relativity and more time buying cash flow rentals. I like it. Who did that one?
That's me.
Mike, that's a good one.
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure that this is an actual quote from Albert, but I'm mostly sure that it is an actual quote.
Yeah, that's it. It's probably what he was thinking about.
I think so.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's what I would have been thinking about.
He certainly wasn't thinking I should comb my hair or mustache today.
No, and he wasn't thinking about, I should change the entire future of science as we know it.
Right.
No.
All right, guys. When you use technology to your advantage and the deal gets negotiated for you, what is that? I don't even know what this is.
You don't see what that is? That's
looks
a
like a
microwave
washer.
on its side.
It's a
No way.
Oh, I see.
I was
now.
trying to figure out what it was.
I thought it was a
too.
washer or like a front loading dryer or something like that.
That is funny.
This one I
the
saw.
crispness of the image is so good.
Well, this one I saw somewhere this week, and it said up in the white, it said, I turned my microwave on its side, and it was totally stoked about it or something like that.
That's great.
And so I had to repurpose it.
Oh, that's funny. I like it, guys. Well, here's the deal. We've got coming soon the opportunity for you guys to submit some of your own favorite real estate, investing, cash flow creation, wealth building, funny memes.
Yes.
And I want you to stay plugged in. And when we make that available, drop them to us because we'll highlight them here. We'll talk about them and we'll get a chuckle out of it along the way. And what I also want to say, guys, is this. If you want to dive deeper into some of these topics beyond our show that we're doing here on a regular basis, what I want you to do is go to fastermogul.com. Go to fastermogul.com, and you can dive into a little mini training series that breaks down some of these concepts that we talk about on a regular basis, and you hear some of the stories. And we'll talk in the Faster Mogul training, we'll dive into not only the theory and the story, but we'll talk about some of the practicality of how to take actions to put these things into place. So if you go to fastermogul.com, you're going to have the opportunity to plug along.
Beautiful.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.
Cheers.
Later.